Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Inside the Birds. It's Adam Caplan, and for this show, and for many more, hopefully, our good friend Andrew DiCecco, the ITBB writer extraordinaire. Andrew, good to see you.
Adam, it's great to be with you as always. We have a lot to discuss.
We do, and to dissect and go inside a lot. Like, we usually don't talk much about the press conferences because we're about inside information, but I tell you, when Vic Fangio speaks, he gives out so much great stuff. We'll dissect it. We'll explain it. We could extrapolate because there's some things we've known behind the scenes, and he kind of explains some of the things. And it's funny because when coaches speak in the off season, it's kind of sometimes just to make the media happy, and they don't really mean what they say. But I think this guy means what he says, as you would know.
Yeah, absolutely.
You
He
know,
always has a couple interesting nuggets
yeah,
one way or the other, and I always appreciate the transparency.
yep, he's great. So they returned to practice on Monday. On Tuesday, you guys were able to watch. The media was able to watch. Wednesday, today is the playground build, I believe, correct? I think
Yes,
the animal playground build, which is great. And then they practice tomorrow. And then one more. Now it's a mandatory practice. As coaches
June
have told
10th.
me over the years, it's Tuesday. There's absolutely no difference in coaching it. It's just everyone's got to be there. Now, for the players, they might have an extra little urgency because it's their last practice till training camp. It's last practice to impress the players. You know, Andrew, what I find interesting is the Eagles are the only team that only practices one day for mandatory camp. This is very interesting why they do that.
Yeah, I guess that they're just tweaking things based off of last season, but they can always add. I guess they can always add to it if they need to, but they're so efficient in what they do, and they have methods that are tried and true. So I think that
True.
it's kind of hard to go against that.
Can't argue against it. All right, let's get to Vic Fangio. So Vic spoke for 11, 12 minutes, and he dropped something. Look, we knew he was practicing outside corner, but that was not the only nugget that he dropped. So, Andrew, let's go inside what he said. What do you think that means, and where do we go from here with what he talked about with CooperDeJean?
He added safety unprompted, talking about CooperDeJean. And I'll be honest with you, when CooperDeJean was entering the draft, I evaluated him largely as a safety. And Vic Fangio said that his skill set really translates favorably to safety. And it sounds like something that they're legitimately going to explore. And it's not just something that he says. Vic Fangio doesn't just say things at the podium. There's always meaning behind it. And he was going through CooperDeJean some individual drills with the safeties, and they had linebackers coach Bobby King holding the bag, and they had the safeties go through, and they had Connor Barwin also involved in the drill as well. And so Cooper was there. He also lined at outside corner when they were in base to open 7-on-7s, and then he kicked inside at nickel as well. So this is a player going into his second season that can wear a multitude of hats, and I think the Eagles are certainly going to exploit that.
All right, so here's my read on it. And there's some stuff we had known. Back in, I think on March, somewhere in March, we put on our show, maybe February, March, that the word is that they are gonna keep DeJean and nickel. And it's interesting, Andrew. Other teams we were speaking with, during free agency, because I was asking some teams about had the Eagles called or asked about corner. There were a bunch of teams that I thought might be trading or might make available some of their veteran corners. They weren't going to extend. What the clubs heard about corner, and they said no, they didn't ask us about corner. They asked about other positions, and there were a lot of people around the league thought, you know what, um, at some point they're probably going to play him at corner, and he to me, there were a couple things here that now he did clarify though, because he did. Because you know how the media sometimes runs with stuff, or fans that they hear him say this stuff. Because I listened to it live, and I was like, "Oh, wait a minute, what does this mean?" Well, he did throw out that because he gave the media a quiz, Andrew. By the way, when he gave you the quiz, what was your guess on how much base defense they played? I was just curious what your thought was, percentage wise, or
10 or 15%.
right. Well, it's interesting. You're close. 9.4% they played, based on Vic's number of 160 snaps for 17 games. It's 9.4 snaps per game. Now, here's the question. That just mean when teams typically play way more base defense in the first half because you throw to you well, depending on what down it is, but what happens, there's a feeling out process in the first half. You want to see how teams are going to play you. And then once a team gets behind, you're going to play nickel exclusively or dime the rest of the game. Though analytically, you like to come out throwing, and that doesn't mean you can't throw out of 12 personnel. But the bottom line is, we know that Jordan Davis doesn't play a lot because the Eagles play a ton of nickel. So now here's my question back to you here with DeJean is because they did draft him to play corner. That was the position they saw him playing, and we know that that's not what he played last year. Where are you at with Cooper? What do you think his best position is? And I know you said you thought scouting, doing your own scouting, you thought that safety was the position because he did play some at Iowa. Do you still feel that way?
No, I think outside corner. I think it's only a matter of time. Not this season necessarily, but I think eventually his skill set, his athleticism, I think it would behoove the Eagles to move him to the outside. But I think for right now, Adam, nickel has to be the role because one, it's a starting position in today's NFL. The Eagles don't have anybody to plug in, maybe down the line, Drew Makuba, but he's got to learn safety first. But I think what CooperDeJean is able to do with that athleticism, that length, the ability to kind of have that understanding of what all three levels of the defenses are accounting for, I think that's invaluable. And for right now, knowing how critical that position is to the defense, I think you have to leave him there. It's one of your best players on defense.
Yeah, in fact, well, that was one of the things that was very clear to me. Fangio, because he knows that DeJean is one of their two best defensive players, and from football operations, they're going to want him DeJean on. If he doesn't get 100% play time, they want him on high 80s, low 90s at a minimum. And you always want to get your best players on the field, and that's simply what they're doing here. He's just this is one of those, Andrew. This is I don't know what information you got last year, but one of the things that Jeff and I got, and it was very consistent. The reason why he was not a first round pick had nothing to do with the injuries that he had at Iowa. It was you're trying to figure out what is he at the next level. When you don't know what a guy is, you're going to put your grade on the players. He a first or second round pick.
Yeah, I got the same thing. And it had nothing to do with the ability. It's where does he fit at the next level?
Right. And then it's funny. They're cross training as they did in OTAs last year, but even more so now. Then, of course, unfortunately, he got hurt. But yeah, it's interesting. And then he did talk a bit about the safety position. So I'm going to ask you this question. Mm-hmm. My first question to you would be, and this is a good discussion point, where do you think he is with Sidney Brown?
I think he's a player who he wasn't around when they drafted him, and he doesn't necessarily fit the prototype of what he typically looks for from that position. What I mean by that is he plays like his hair is on fire. He's not exactly always someone who's fundamentally sound. And if you're not fundamentally sound, as we've learned from Vic Fangio, he may not trust you to put you out there. And also to expand on that, his skill set might be a little bit redundant with Reed Blankenship, whereas someone like a Makuba has the versatility, the football intelligence, and I just think that he is a much more rangy type of player and fundamentally sound, which I think actually lends itself to Vic Fangio, endearing himself to Vic Fangio. And he kind of has a skill set. I'm not saying he's exactly like that player, but reminiscent of C.J. Gardner-Johnson and his ability to take the football away and be versatile and allow the defense to be multiple.
Also at the safety position, he wanted to make sure he mentioned Tristan McCullum.
Yeah.
Which I thought was interesting. Now he's basically been a special teams player and a force safety for them. Does he have a role in this team other than special teams?
I think special teams is probably his role in being an immediate backup, but he didn't just throw his name out there. As we talked about, Vic Fangio doesn't just say things.
Sure.
They trust and they like Tristan McCullum. He's someone who is always going to be assignment sound. He doesn't have the ceiling of a Sidney Brown, certainly not of a Drew Makuba, but he's a reliable player who he can plug in, and he might not make the big play, but he's going to make the plays more often than not that come his way. And I think that him being a smart player, again, we keep going back to football intelligence. I think that that's something that Vic Fangio doesn't take lightly.
The inside backer position, and I love the way Vic does it. He does it unlike any other defensive coordinator that I've covered or have heard speak. Corner's corner, nickel's nickel. Nickel's not a corner. I guess it's a defensive back, but he refuses to call it a corner. He doesn't use off the ball. He calls it inside backer.
ILBs, yeah.
Yeah, and he did mention they run a 34 front. I know people call it a 5-1 or 5-2. That's fine. But other clubs we've spoken with clearly called a 34 with two overhangs to make it look like a 5-2. Whatever, you can call whatever the hell you want. It's an odd man front. That's indisputable. Mm-hmm. I find it comical, and I love it that he does that because he makes no mistake about how he sees players. And it helps also for reporting or analyzing, the way that he sees it. So let's get to inside backer. And again, he talked about, we've known this. Jeff put on our show weeks ago that he'd heard Nakobe Dean won't be back till October. Vic wouldn't put a timeline on. He just said he won't be. Whatever the words he said, he won't be back
anytime soon. Yeah,
anytime soon. Right. Now, Jihad Campbell, he said won't be able to practice. Now, practicing, depending on which coaches you speak, there's in training camp, there's practicing limited, there's practicing fully, then there's PUP where you can't practice. You could work out with the trainers, you could run, but you can't get on the field with your teammates.
Hmm.
I mean, I just can only assume he meant he won't be on the. Maybe this means he won't be. He'll be on PUP to start. Be on active PUP, won't be on reserve because reserve means you can't. You'll be out for games of the season.
Right.
Do you feel like he meant kind of he won't be back till at all practicing at all until August?
Yeah, well, nothing's obviously etched in stone. If you read between the lines, that was what that's how I interpreted it, but we'll have to wait and see. He said he won't be on the field until sometime in August. So,
Yeah, and that
yeah,
right now if he says field, that means you're going to be with the trainers. That means if wants to extrapolate, that's active PUP to start training camp, which means you could come off of any time. But the reason why he has to be on it, either he can practice, or even if he's not going to be ready for a week, what you don't want to do is have the guy come back early. Let's say he gets hurt, he cannot go back on. Once you're off of it and you're on it, you cannot go back on by league rules. So
hmm,
you have to be absolutely sure. So, and we'll get to your practice notes and what how you feel, what you saw about it. But um, yeah, so it's basically right now it's Trot Jr. and Bond, as we know. Mondon's there. We know Dallas Gant. They're very light at inside backer,
yeah,
Andrew.
very.
Yeah, very, and we'll talk more about that a little later. Then he made some interesting comments on Jordan Davis. Boy, you want to talk about a back and forth with the media? What did you interpret by his comments on Jordan Davis overall?
That he's coming along and he did some good things in practice in terms of evolving as a pass rusher. He wouldn't really elaborate in terms of what he needed to do to get his conditioning into shape, but it seemed to be that he's pleased with his progress. And they're going to need Jordan Davis, obviously, to handle some of the snaps that were taken on by Milton Williams, who played 501 snaps last season, Adam. So they need Jordan Davis to continue his trajectory and be the player who they're expecting him to be. Of course, with Moro Ojimo and Ty Robinson as well.
Yeah, he did mention Robinson when he's talking about their defensive front and guys are going to have to contribute without Milt Williams, as you talked about. He did talk about Jalen Hunt and Nolan Smith. Nolan Smith, getting some work in. He come back from the torn triceps. Nolan did say, we'll get to the player comments right now. This is interesting. He did say that he's hoping to get cleared soon to strike, which is basically you're ready to go. So
Mm-hmm.
he's obviously very close. That's great because typically triceps surgery, you could start working after 4 months. So he's in that area right now. Let's just talk 1 second before we get to the players here because he did talk about Ojulari and Uche. Um, do you feel right now, based on what he was talking about, that Nolan Smith and Hunt right now, if the season started today, would be the starters for sure?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think that when you look at where Jalen Hunt was last summer, and he was largely viewed as a redshirt prospect coming out of Houston Christian, he flashed a little bit in training camp. Then the regular season, he was inactive for week one, so maybe it looks like he's going to be a redshirt player.
Mm.
Factors into the rotation later in the season, and then by the postseason, he has a sack and a half. I think that when you look at his rapid progression, it's easy to forecast him being a starter opposite Nolan Smith. And then as Ojulari, if he can stay healthy, he would be an ideal third edge rusher in that rotation. The question I have beyond that is Josh Uche, Powell Ryland, Patrick I mean, Josh Uche is going to have to work to make the team. When we have to keep going back to the 2022 season where he was productive, most productive, I mean, that's a little troubling. Until I see him on the field and executing and working into the system, it's kind of hard for me to say, yeah, they're good there. They're four deep. You know what I mean?
Would agree with you there. All right, so the players also spoke: Adoree Jackson, Keely Ringo, Trot Jr., Nolan Smith. From we talked about what Nolan talked about. He's doing well. He talks to BG. He says basically every day.
I saw BG today. Yeah.
Oh, was he there?
Yeah, he gave every media member a handshake as we were
That's
going
awesome.
through to the auditorium.
He's awesome. So you know what's so interesting about it? So Connor Barron worked for the team, right?
Mm-hmm.
Darren Sproles has been in scouting. Brent Selleck has worked. He contributes. Obviously, you'll
Matt
see.
Leo, Matt
What's that?
Leo's there.
Who's that?
Remember Matt Leo?
Matt Leo, right. So he's part of the staff. Is he? What is his role now? I forget. Is it front
Don't
office?
remember. I see him often. I see him around
Right.
often.
We know he works for them. We know that Kelsey will show up a lot. I remember seeing Brent Selleck after he retired. He had not had a role yet with the Eagles. He would just show up. It's really cool because a lot of the guys live in the area. They love their time with the Eagles. You don't typically see that around the National Football League. That's a pretty good story.
Yeah, it all starts with the culture. I think that's established by Jeffrey Lurie and Howie Roseman, Nick Sirianni. It's a place that
Yeah.
people want to be, and obviously even before Nick Sirianni and all that, I think Jeffrey Lurie has done a really good job of establishing that culture that free agents want to be, players want to stay around the organization. That it's not often that you see that around the NFL, in my
I mean,
experience.
yep, Joe Douglas is coming back, who worked for Howie,
Yeah,
who I know loves being in the area from what we're told. So yeah, Joe D's going to be back. It's and as you know, going to training camp, man, Jaws is there a lot. Obviously, Ike Reese,
Harold
Barrett Books,
Carmichael's around. Yeah,
Harold, our guy, number 17, Hall of Famer, greatest guy in the world. I mean, you see him all return, man. It's a good stuff. So, all right, Adoree Jackson. It's the first time I heard Adoree speak. What were your thoughts on what he had to say?
I thought he was great. I thought that he was just very open as to why he chose New York over Philly the first time around. And talked about how he realized that Keely he lit up when he was asked about Keely Ringo. So I get the sense that there's a close knit relationship there, despite there being a competition, and that he didn't realize that Keely was from California, so they had a connection there. But I thought that it was interesting talking about the communication that happens on the field. And he mentioned Anais Smith, where he was asking him a question on the field, why he did something a certain way to get that knowledge. So he's a veteran player, Adam, but he's not above seeking knowledge from however he can get it. So he strikes me as a player that is going to show up in training camp. He's not going to be a Greedy Williams. He's going to show up and make things interesting. I was actually pretty impressed with him.
Yeah, and what he also, I'll add this. What I thought was interesting is he said two things that were cool. He talked about the welcomeness of the organization. We've heard this a lot. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's a pretty welcoming place. Now, I don't know if that was always the case, but the culture, which you mentioned about it, is really turned around since the 2020 season. Whether it's Sirianni coming in, where Howie's kind of changed things after 2020. It's the last bad year that they've really had. So yeah, it's really good. And he also talked about how look they obviously do stuff right. They've been in the Super Bowl two out of the last 3 years and won one of them. So he did note that he noticed that they do things a certain way here. Now he didn't really elaborate what those were or what he noticed between you being the Giants and the Titans, but I thought that was really interesting. So yeah, you're talking about a veteran player who's maybe a couple years left, turning the age of 30, who's seen it. He was with the Giants when they were decent, and he's been with them when they've been bad. Now he goes to maybe right now the best organization in the National Football League.
Yeah.
Certainly in the NFC, it's a pretty good story at this point of his career.
Yeah, I think that this is actually a legitimate cornerback battle, not someone who they
Yeah,
signed to
true.
throw in there. And
Yep.
I really do think that it could come down to the wire. We'll have to wait and see when the pads come on and training camp and all of that. But I'm getting the sense that both players are very well aware that, and Vic said it, because they know that there's a battle to be won here.
All right, next guy who spoke, his teammate and competitor, Keely Ringo, now in his third season out of Georgia, by the way, and this is a big one. He got beaten out pretty soundly last season by Isaiah Rodgers, kind of after the first week of training camp, after that really good offseason that Ringo had. So now he knows now he could kind of figure out what didn't work for him in training camp. But what do you think of what he had to say on Tuesday?
I've always been really impressed, Adam, talking to Keely Ringo. He's very self aware and very thoughtful in his answers. But this is a player who's now entering his third season. And really, what I took away from it is he learned a lot from the first two seasons, and he's sort of able to apply what works, what didn't work, and being around. He talked about how he's still, close knit relationship with Slay. So he always seemed to be somebody who gravitates to all of his teammates and utilizes a lot of them for resources and things like that. He's going to be ready for it, and he even mentioned about what it would be like to stay at college for those two
Yeah,
seasons,
right.
and he left. Obviously, things would have been a lot different had he stayed, but he's a bit of a raw player, very young, and I don't know. He seemed to be like very reflective today, and I thought that very wise. He's a young player, but he seems like wise. Like the 2 years that he's had under his belt now, I think are going to serve him well in this competition.
Yeah, it's interesting because he had that excellent OTAs last year, and
He
everyone
was
got
very good
excited.
in OTAs last year.
What's that?
He was very good in OTAs. I
Yep,
remember I
yep.
kept jotting down 22 versus 11, 22 contested catch, 11 wins, but 22 is closely.
Wow.
He was
There you
there.
go. Yeah. And comparatively to his rookie training camp, he struggled. We're going to be nice about it. He just didn't play well. He didn't perform well. Last year's training camp, not great. He needs to be better. But this is, look, he's going against an old guy, Dory Jackson. Like he's this is it, man. This is it because they got to get this is kind of a they went bargain basement here with the Dory Jackson, who's actually making less than he did last year with the Giants. So this is a good opportunity here. It's a great opportunity. It's actually better than good. It's a great opportunity for Ringo. Let's see what happens. Now, Trot Jr. finished it off.
Oh,
Talk
by
about
the
an
way,
opportunity. Good.
by the way, for those
Yeah.
wondering, he answered a question about his number change.
Oh, yeah, good.
He wore number 7 in high school, wanted it at Georgia, but Quay Walker wore number 7. And then, of course, when he got to the NFL, Hassan Reddick had it, and Kenny Pickett last year. So now he was finally
Jaws.
able. He had his eye on it the whole time, and
Yeah.
now he's able to have it.
Jaws, Michael Vick. I don't know who else had it over the years, but yeah, lucky number 7. All right. So then Trot Jr. spoke, and obviously he's the man now because they're so light at inside backer. He spoke well. I mean, he's pretty calm guy. I mean, it's just funny though. Seeing him in practice, you know what he weighed, but then you look at his dad, you go, wow, talk about a size difference. And what were your thoughts about Trot on Tuesday?
Another guy, very thoughtful in his responses. Every time I would talk to him last year, it would be about, I'm working on block destruction because that's what Coach Bobby King's talking to me about. So he really fixates on the fundamentals, and he talked about what he learned from last year and how he developed for this season here. Talked about the axe chop in the Super Bowl and what factored into that emotional type of moment that his
Uh-huh.
dad was wondering why he didn't bust it out for the Giants game when he made some plays. He goes, I'm kind of saving it for a good moment, and it obviously manifested in the Super Bowl. But yeah, this is a player who is going to have a very big opportunity here, and that's not lost on him. There's not a lot of players that are challenging him for those reps while
True. Yeah.
Jahad Campbell and Nakobe Dean are on the mend. So this is a big opportunity for him to carve out that role. And Vic Fangio is very confident in him. If you remember back to after the Packers game, they would have been very comfortable going to him in the postseason had it not been for Orton Burks performing as
That's
well as
right.
he did.
That's right.
So, and Vic kind of alluded to that during his presser today as well, sort of doubling down in that support.
What we heard last year in practice, he made a number of really good plays when he got a chance to work with the first team defense last year in practice. So we'll see. I mean, he's right now, if the season started today, he'd be starting. And as you
He
said, and
also
I
was
agree.
roommates with Drew Makuba at Clemson when they were freshmen.
Oh, is that right? Oh, so they know
Yeah.
each other. See, I didn't know that. Wow, that's interesting. So him and Nakuba uh, know each other. So okay, we'll see. We'll see if they get in the field a lot together this season. We'll see how that works out. That is interesting because you've got Trot Jr., a sophomore, so to speak, and you got a rookie, and we'll see because but they're young, and the Eagles have the youngest defense on paper right now in the National Football League. So which is a good thing. We're not used to that with the Eagles here, so it's going to be interesting. So, but we want to take a quick break right before we take this break. We're going to tell you right after it. We're going to go over Andrew's all of his intel from practice, notes and so forth. You're listening to Inside the Birds. We'll be right back.
Sky Motor Cars in Westchester is a different sort of dealership. All it takes is one look at their Highline pre-owned vehicles that people all over the country want and need. Owner Brett Schiller, make sure you don't spend a dime of your money before you purchase the car. Sky Motor Cars allows you to make all the decisions regarding your next vehicle. At Sky Motor Cars, you never have to spend more than necessary. Visit SkyMotorCars.com today or call 610-918-7225.
All right, Andrew, let's get to the offense. And first of all, because you guys were there last week, they were indoors in the practice facility. It was raining. It's a hard surface. It's not great. You don't get great viewing, but you get a beautiful viewing because it was really nice on Tuesday. Let's get to offense. What are your thoughts on what you saw on Tuesday?
I thought JalenHurts was sharp. Now, there wasn't the explosive throws. There was a lot of dump offs and throws to the tight ends. And I thought he made really sharp decisions. And he was accurate and delivered passes with timing and accuracy. The play of the day, Adam, though, was the deep shot from JalenHurts, the rare deep shot where he threw it down the left sideline to the outside shoulder on the money to Dallas Goedert with Zach Bond closely trailing. It couldn't have been thrown any better. And Jalen sort of knew that he kind of called the shot. He knew it was going to happen. He put his hand up. But it kind of just really underscores how important Dallas Goedert is to this offense and how important he is to JalenHurts. They have an undisputed connection there. Will Shipley continues to impress catching the football, turning upfield. You see the acceleration. He also looks like he's added a little bit of size to his frame, looks a little stronger. And I think that's going to serve him well, especially in pass protection. The offensive line, they had Brett Toth still at center with the first team. Obviously, with Cam Jurgens still recovering from the back surgery, he was working on a side field. They had Brett Toth there. They still had Tyler Steen at right guard, which is not a surprise to us. We expect him to be the front runner there until proven otherwise. Lane Johnson was back this week, and he wasn't there for the media attended practice last week. Off to the side today, Avery Williams. Avery Williams was undisclosed injury. He wasn't there last week, so I'm not quite sure what's going on there. But A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith. Devontae was not there. A.J. did not partake in the team drill. So the primary wide receivers were Jahan Dotson, Terrace Marshall, and Anais Smith. I thought Terrace Marshall was most active. Jahan Dotson found the soft spot in the zone a couple early on in practice, had a couple catches. Nothing out of the ordinary. And I'll add this. I saw Ben Van Sumeren during individual drills. Looks to be running at full speed.
Okay.
Did not partake in team drills, obviously, but he looks like he's close. He ran a wheel route that I had to do a double take. It almost looked like a tight end running the wheel route. Accelerates, caught the ball over the shoulder seamlessly. He's just a very, very incredible athlete. So that was something that I thought was notable as well, because he's coming off that knee injury, and he wasn't at practice last week when we were there.
All right, couple follow-ups for you, because one of our guys, and I know you got to know him because you talked to him leading up to the draft 3 years ago, 80 Danny Gray and Terrace Marshall. All right, first of all, let's go to Marshall first, because he's a guy that when we talked about under-the-radar players who certainly have a chance to not only make the team but have some sort of role, Terrace Marshall is a guy I know he can play. He's had, talking to the Panthers about him, a couple minor injuries. They wanted him to apply himself more. He just didn't have enough juice in practice, and they were done with him. He's bounced around, but he's got talent. What does he look body type? Because this is the kind of stuff I look at. Is body type. What did he look like to you up front, if you could see him?
A big, strong frame. Somebody who I think can really come down with those contested catches and use his body to shield off defenders. Well, I can't wait to see what he's able to do when the pads come on, because that's really where you can see where his physicality really is.
And by the way, he's wearing an odd number.
46.
What is that? A receiver? That's a long snapper number. What is that about?
Jacob Harris wore that last year.
There you go.
Remember, that's the first person I thought of. And Tariq Castro Fields wears it on defense.
Oh, is that right? Oh, I hate when they do that.
I don't know why I remember this stuff, Adam, but it's like ingrained in my mind.
It is weird. No, Danny Gray. So this is a guy we talked about on our show on the Under the Radar guys, because he could flat out run. With Devontae not practicing and A.J. Brown not really, and Devontae's not there and A.J. wasn't really working, what did you see from Danny Gray in that practice?
I'll tell you what, Danny Gray is a name that folks should just keep an eye on, because he can obviously run. He ran at 4.33 at the combine. He's a 3-level threat. I was watching him run routes today, razor sharp routes. He had a bad drop today on a slant route, but he did catch one down the middle. I think it was a Tanner McKee pass. He was active. He was frequently targeted. I think that he's going to be a guy that when the pads come on and he's getting behind the secondary in training camp, that's going to be somebody that you constantly see his name showing up in the practice notes, because that type of setting favors his skill set. And I'll tell you this, Adam, I spoke to him last season many different times at his locker, and he said, trust me, if I was here last summer for training camp, I would have made the 53. I'm just saying that now. He's like, I'm not arrogant. I'm just saying that because I know the ability and the work that I put in. And he kind of stands apart when you watch him out there amongst some of the other players that are in that similar tier. And he was also back returning a couple kicks. So I think that if he's able to kind of add that to his arsenal, that is going to make him a little bit more invaluable, because the more you can do.
Yeah, especially with the back end of the roster player, the more you can do, the better chance you have of making it. Yeah, he's, unfortunately, he was on the IR twice with the Niners. He could flat out fly, track star in high school. Yeah, he's got an opportunity here. Anais Smith, who's really a slot receiver.
Power slot, yeah.
Yeah, is the term that one of the teams came up with, so we put it on our show. That's the way they saw him. And he's a guy that who's interesting because he, as you know, he had the foot problem last year. So he's a guy that's going to get an opportunity here. All right, offensive line. Let's get to that. this is interesting because they have a kind of a loaded room. We know backup center is kind of a quagmire with Brett Toth. He's been there a long time. He's played just about every position for them, guard, tackle, now center, and Drew Kendall. So what did you see on the offensive line during Tuesday's practice?
By the way, I think Brett Toth, when his career is over, is going to be a coach. I always see
Really?
him working with players on the sideline, and I would see that in the locker room. He'd be working
Hmm.
with edge rushers and things like that. So
Nice.
there's a benefit of having someone like that around. But yeah, so the starters in team drills, it was Jordan Mailata at left tackle, Landon Dickerson at left guard, Brett Toth at center, Tyler Steen at right guard, and at right tackle was Lane Johnson. No surprise there, really, because they don't have a true backup center there yet, and Drew Kendall is not yet ingrained. That could change, obviously, in training camp. But
Yep.
I think the big story there was Tyler Steen reprising his role as the right guard. He was last week when we saw him there as well. I thought he did a nice job last season, Adam. Obviously, he struggled as a rookie, but entering mid-game is a tall task for any player, and I thought that he showed that he was prepared. And now he's in his third season at Stoutland University, so we'll have to see how that manifests. But let's not forget, he would have been the starter. He went into last summer as the starter, hurt his ankle, and you have to give Mekhi Becton credit for stepping up and seizing the opportunity.
Yeah, he never got his job back. I mean, they never even gave him a chance. After Steen got healthy, he was over. It was really interesting. And you
Yeah.
can't blame Stoutland because he was right.
Yes.
Now he's almost certain to enter training camps as starter. Now, Kenyon Green, I assume he was the number 2 right guard?
Actually, I saw him at. I think I saw him at left, and I saw Matt Pryor at right.
Really? Cross training.
Yeah.
Oh, see, that stuff's interesting. I generally don't care who the second, third teams are, but I do care when they change positions because guess what happens? If somebody gets hurt, you're going to remember when they work the guy at that other position. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Really, I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah, I think it was 76. Yeah, 76
Okay.
that left guard.
Wow.
So I mean, they're probably just like they did with Sua Opeta
Cross
later in
training.
his career. They're probably just trying to mix and match and see where players are most comfortable, so that you can see how that is going to translate in training camp.
So Marcus Tate, by the way, just so folks know, yeah, we looked into it. He had a significant knee injury. He had a bunch of injuries at Clemson, but his last injury was a major knee injury. That's why he was not drafted because he was at the combine. You just don't see guys who are at the combine, A, not get drafted, or B, not even sign as undrafted free agents because he
He's
had
a tryout player.
Yeah,
He's a
exactly.
tryout.
He had a knee injury. That's why. Trevor Keegan. So is he basically a third team guy right now?
Right now, and it's very difficult to forecast where he fits, Adam, because if you could just play guard, you don't have that swing tackle. You're
Yeah.
not able to help the team in multiple positions. It's really tough to see where he's going to fit. Now, obviously, it's very early right now, and if he can play right and left guard, who knows? He can have a role on game day potentially, but he's not locked to make the team, Adam. They've added a lot of players there,
Yep.
even some of the draft picks that are going to be really enticing, I think. So yeah, he's with the third team at the moment.
Cam Williams, third team, I would assume
Third
right now.
team.
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
Darian Kennard is
yeah.
a bit of a sleeper here.
Okay.
I know the Eagles like him, and he did kick inside and play guard for a time in last summer. Obviously, he's the right tackle. He's the second team right tackle right now. It's somebody to keep an eye on. You always look for those dark horses at this time of the year, and I think Darian Kennard is a player that we probably don't talk enough about or talk really about when we're trying to project the offensive line. But I think that he's somebody worth monitoring.
One more for you. Miles Hinton's the guy that I feel long term could be the swing tackle. Is he still kind of? Did he go to both? Did he line up at both right and left tackle, or what did you see?
And I think it was just right, if I'm remembering correctly,
Okay.
without looking at my notes.
Got you.
But
Okay.
he's a player that I was very impressed when he had his interview, when he interviewed, had the media availability. And that's a guy who I agree with you, Adam. I think that he projects as a long-term reserve tackle and a swing tackle.
Let's get to the defense. And what I kind of find interesting is that when Fangio spoke, he mentioned a lot of players, man. He didn't miss many of them. So let's get to the D line. Now they don't have a lot of defensive tackles. They're kind of light there. Ty Robinson, the backups we know, Robinson, Booker, Young, who we did mention, who's a really big time under the radar player because his measurables are. He's on my under the radar list because, man, the Raiders cut him after 1 year. The guy was a third round pick out of Alabama. Gabe Hall, of course. So what are your thoughts? Anything interesting that you glean or learn from the D lineman group so far in OTAs?
Yeah, it's always really tough to glean much in terms of just the OTAs and the setting, the nature of it. You don't see the the physicality.
Yeah.
But Thomas Booker is an active player. Thomas Booker is somebody who I always notice that whenever he's on the field. I think Moro Ojomo has some good burst, has good get off, and those are just a couple of the notes that I had written down. But
Yeah.
again, you're able to have more of a takeaway when you're able to see them in a live practice setting. But as far
Yep.
as today, you just notice a couple different nuances, intricacies.
All right. So the edges. So right now, so with Smith unable to practice really, he's just doing limited stuff. So it was with Hunt. Who are the guys that are working mostly with the first team this practice?
Ojulari,
Okay.
Aziz Ojulari. That was pretty much the way that it was the last time as well. Then Uche works in. I mean, they're really light there. You have Patrick Johnson. Patrick Johnson got some solid work today, but yeah, I think Aziz Ojulari is really the third, if I had to guess. The only thing that could stop that is his injuries, but
Mm-hmm.
yeah, they're about 3 deep right now, and I have a lot of questions after that.
Because really, Campbell, according to Fangio, won't be back till August. He's working. We should mention it. Inside backer. That's the way they're training him. He's not practicing, but they're training him. Inside backer first. So his role as a rookie right now is totally up in the air. They're not going to know
Yes.
that for a while, which is what we told people when he was drafted. Be careful of anything people guessing where he's going to line up. They don't know. This is what we told
Yeah,
people.
he's a multifaceted defensive
Yeah,
player.
yeah. And he's got to learn. Okay, this is a different defense than he played in college, so he's got to learn it first. But all right, so let's get so right now we just talked about Power Island. We know is what third team guy, I would assume
Yeah,
right
he's
now.
a third team guy.
Okay, O'Shawn Mathis is there and KJ Henry. Let's get to the backers. The inside backers, as Vic calls them. So we talked about Nakobe. We know won't be back for months. Terrible injury, patella tendon. So it's Bond and Trotter, Mondin. Campbell can't practice right now, so that's another guy who's not practicing inside backer. Boy,
Dallas
they
Gant,
super late. Dallas Gant,
and Lance Dixon.
Good, yeah. Anything noticeable about these guys? Body type, smaller. It's the stuff I always look for.
Mondin plays, even though it was non-contact, he plays physical. He was studying some of the
Okay,
guys. I
good.
think he moves pretty well. He's going to be a standout on special teams, and I think eventually that may lend itself to factoring in to the defense. I just think that he has something to offer there, and he strikes me as somebody, obviously having the 3 years of starting experience at Georgia, that's going to grasp that system fairly quickly. And I mean, he's more athletic than Trotter Jr. and all of that,
Yeah.
but obviously Trotter Jr. is ahead of him in the pecking order. But other than that, Adam, nothing really of note there in terms of linebacker play.
All right, let's get to the back end. So we talked about safety. Blankenship was back. He was not there last week. Blankenship is back. So who worked? Was it Brown and Makuba opposite Blankenship? What did the rotation look like on Tuesday?
It was Brown and Blankenship to start.
Okay.
Makuba worked in,
Yeah.
and then also Lewis Seen worked in, Tristan McComb worked in, and Andre Sam worked in. Max and Hook did not work in, obviously, with that group. But I thought that that's notable. Obviously, I think when the dust settles, it'll be Makuba. He's a second-round pick, and Reed Blankenship. But if you listen to what Vic Fangio had to say about Sidney Brown, it kind of suggests that, yeah, don't be so quick to say that he's going to be, in the starting conference or a starter, because it seems like he added other guys to the mix. Didn't seem like he wanted to kind of dismiss it a little bit.
Well, because as he said, Brown had a lost year last year because he really
It took him
got
until
hurt.
October.
Right,
Yeah.
right, and he's so far. But remember, he was not on the field in training camp. He was rehabbing. You would see him doing sprints with the
Yeah.
trainers, a lot of mental reps. So when you're missing 6 or 7 months of being on the field, you can't make that up in 1 month. So he was just too far behind. And Vic, he put it out there. He said, look, last year he just didn't, he started too late, in terms of practicing. So, and by the way, they have enough players. It's just a matter of, okay, how do they use Brown? What is he at this point? More of a box safety. Blankenship's been pretty steady. Makuba, you expect to start. He was drafted in the second round. That's the starting round. Vic talked about McCullum. Seen is now back here for a full off season. We'll see an Andre Sam, who I know you've outlined a lot for us. So they have enough players. That's not the problem.
I get asked about Seen an awful lot, Adam.
Yeah.
I've gotten asked about him at least a half dozen times. A lot of people are intrigued about his ability. Obviously, a few years removed now from being a first-round pick and the injury history and all of that, but very tall for his
Long.
safety,
Yeah.
close to 6'3", a lanky build. I know you and Adam talked, you and Jeff talked about him cross training at linebacker, I believe, with the
Yeah, the
Bills.
Bills did. We were told. Yeah.
Yeah, so I don't know. He's an interesting player, and he's going to have to excel on special teams if he wants a shot at making the roster. But Andre Sam as that safety four group is a little bit intriguing to me.
Yeah, because I was just going to say teams typically keep four. You know, you don't keep five, and sometimes you only keep three, depending on if your corners or your nickel could play safety. But when you look at this situation with them at safety, you just don't find guys that's that long, of over 6'2", and then his athletic traits are ridiculous. The measurables, arm length, speed, you name it, he's got it. But he hasn't played meaningful football in nearly 3 years, so you just don't know. Now we'll see, and we'll find. We're gonna know very early on in training camp kind of how they see him, because that's when the depth chart means a lot, because you start seeing first and second team, third team mean something. So we'll get a look at that. So let's move over to corner. Lastly, it's a big deal here. So we know Mitchell. Now Mitchell, is he a right corner or left corner? Did you see how they were lining him up?
Quinyon was on the far side.
Okay.
He was on the far side. The side closest to us was Keely Ringo opened today as the starter when they were in nickel, and they're going to alternate. It's OTAs.
Yep.
Last time we saw him, it was Adoree Jackson. This time it was Keely Ringo.
Okay. Now, here's the one we didn't ask about. Mac McWilliams wearing a Asante Samuels on number of 22. How have they been using him from what you've seen?
Inside corner. He had a nice pass breakup on a corner route to Harrison Bryant. He got a hand in there. I think it was McKee that tried to fit it into a tight window, and you got to credit McWilliams for getting over there and getting a hand in there to break it up. That was one of the defensive highlights today.
And then also at corner, you've got Perry Nickerson, who's more of a nickel, who knows Vic from their days in Miami.
Yep.
The undrafted Brandon Johnson, Castro Fields, who you mentioned earlier, BJ Mays. So really, and Eli Ricks.
Eli Ricks.
Yeah, can't forget him. Yeah, who it's really funny. Like 23 is a great story. He did everything they asked. The new staff comes in. They bury him on the depth chart. He's still here. Howie never cut him. But honestly, I know they're not letting him compete for a starting job opposite Mitchell. Let's just see what happens in training camp first. I know I'm not saying he's going to compete for it, but they just don't have a lot of depth at outside corner. Well, corner, as Vic calls him. He doesn't call him outside corner. It's nickel or outside corner. So what are your thoughts on Eli Ricks right now going forward?
He's interesting, Adam, because despite all the roster toggling last year, his spot on the roster is never in jeopardy. And cover corners that are 6'2", 188 pounds, and have that kind of pedigree, they're at a premium. You waive somebody like that, they're likely to get claimed. And so while he can't really help the Eagles in terms of special teams because he has a lankier build, by the way, today he was on the second team kickoff unit, he offers something in terms of coverage ability. And I always got the sense that they were happy with that area. He started out training camp very slow last year, and then he turned it on that final week or two. And when I asked Vic about Eli Ricks and Josh Jobe in the same sentence, because they were both players who had to play a lot in 23, he didn't speak too highly of Jobe because of the penalties and all that, but he did offer some complimentary praise for Eli Ricks. So take it for what it's worth. I just think that they like what they have there in terms of him as a pure cover player.
And as you know, Andrew, when it comes down to the last 5 to 7 spots, it's about two things: positional versatility and special teams. If you don't have either, you're not making the team. You have no chance. So you've got to be able to do both, hopefully. But in Rick's case, he's a cornerback. But if you could play specials, and by the way, he's got length. Length is a trait.
Oh, yeah.
That's important. That is important. And this is now his third year with the club. So any final thoughts before we get out of here? Special teams. Yeah, Charlie Hewlett's he's wearing number 47.
47.
Right.
Nate Gary.
Right. Nate Gary was 47. Wow, boy, you have a good memory. See, Avery Williams is hurt, so we didn't get to see him because he's a guy I cannot wait to see in training camp because of what Sirianni said about him at the owners' meetings.
Yeah, he's a guy that I was really excited to see because of those comments, and I want to see how they choose to utilize him on offense. And they're listing him as a receiver, by the way.
Yeah,
receiver return specialist. But yeah, number 18, he was off to the side today. I saw a lot of Danny Gray returning kickoffs and Shunderick Powell, number 39. But yeah, again, that goes back to Danny Gray. The more you can do, you help your chances of catching the eyes of the coaching staff. So we'll have to see. I didn't see Will Shipley back there returning kicks, but he was on the first team kickoff unit.
Couple things for you before we get out of here. So your rookie diary, any early word, any early intel on who that might be?
Smile Mondon's a candidate that I think might make some sense. And I'll tell you this: if Maxon Hook can somehow find a way to make the 53,
It'll be hard.
might be It's going to be very tough, but he might be a good story. Drew Kendall was really impressive in his media availability. He has an interesting background, and she was chatty, which is half the battle. That's what you look for, and you want to be able to share their stories both on and off the field. So right now, I'm leaning towards Smile Mondon. Okay,
great, awesome. So, what give our listeners and viewers on YouTube an idea? What do you got going on with 97.5 The Fanatic lately?
Oh, okay. So on Thursday, I will be co-hosting the afternoon show. I have my Saturday morning show. It's Early Birds with Andrew DiCecco every 9 to 12 every Saturday morning.
Nice, man.
And yeah, that's what I got cooking this week. And then it's subject to change for next week as well. I'll probably be doing. Actually, I'm doing an Eagles OTA spring practice wrap up Tuesday evening from 6 to 8.
Yeah, and your daily DiCecco on
every day.
Yeah, love that. Yeah, we actually were talking about that one. Yeah, usually because when we started doing them, we were like, you don't need to do them for half an hour. It could be 10 minutes, 12 minutes. Your thoughts of the day. I love the one you had last week was like 22 minutes. I'm like, I got to hear this from OTAs.
I had a lot to say.
You did. No, it was great because obviously when I just listened on Bluetooth in my car, I was like, all right, let me just download this and put it in my car. So it was great. All right, so good stuff, man. Now I forgot. Do they let you guys? Are you able to view the mandatory practice? I forget if they let you do that.
Yes, we are.
Awesome.
I believe so.
Great.
Yeah.
Great. We will absolutely have you back for that as a finale of the early off season, and we'll talk about training camp when we get there. All right. For Andrew DiCecco, I'm Adam Caplan. We'll see you on the next one.